All right, I now call the General Committee meeting to order for November 13th, 2024. The meeting's being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. For consent items, I'll read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda. Members of General Committee may ask that an item be held to discuss it further. If an item is not held, the motion is deemed to be approved on consent. No further discussion of the item will take place at General Committee, and the recommended motions will go forward to the next City Council meeting for considerations. Deferred business, motion 24G196, deferred by General Committee on August the 14th, 2024, Parks Strategic Plan Update. That's approved on consent. Reports of reference advisory or special committees. There's one report. That's the community safety meeting from October the 30th, 2024. Councillor Morales, can you give us a summary of the meeting as we go before we go into the actual items?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. The meeting was called into order at 6:02, and sorry, for the October 30th one. Called into order at 6:02 p.m. and then the main thing was the presentation by the Barrie Police Service regarding their key performance indicator, specifically around their strategic plan, about their best practices, and about their priorities in terms of responding to crime and a few other initiatives. And the presentation mainly took up the entire time there, and then we've accepted the report of Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee, which that one was dated October 15th, and we adjourned at 7:12 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Morales, for the summary. We'll move right into the staff reports, BPIA 001-24.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Negussi. DEV 043-24, zoning bylaw amendment application for 830, 864, 912 Lockhart Road in Ward 10. It's approved on consent. DEV 047-24, zoning bylaw amendment application 19 Dundonald Street.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Nixon. DEV 048-24, Andean Lane sidewalk removal feasibility, Ward 7. That's approved on consent. DEV 049-24, intersection safety investigation, Ann Street North and Hanmer Street West, Ward 4. It's approved on consent. ECD 005-24, confidential property acquisition matter, business attraction. That is approved on consent. ECD 010-24, Tourism Barrie in the City of Barrie, Municipal Accommodation Tax MAT Collection Agreement Renewal and Update of Associated Bylaws. That's approved on consent. And then FIN 014-24, Value for Money Service Audit Report.
Hold, please.
That's held by Deputy Mayor Thompson. And that brings us back. We have two items that have been held. We're going to go a little bit out of character this evening, members of committee. With that, we're going to have the presentation by Deloitte with regards to the value for money audit. And I'm going to have, before that, Deputy Mayor Thompson put the actual motion on the floor, so we're doing both things at the same time, and we don't go from value for money audit to something else and then come back to the value for money audit. So Deputy Mayor Thompson, could you please put the motion on the floor?
I'll put the motion on the floor as printed, Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you so much. And before we go with the presentation, I think it's important to note, and I think the request has already been made and denied. In these chambers, we don't allow hats to be worn. We also don't allow for political signage to be used, and would respectfully ask that those rules be respected. You can also choose not to respect them, and it's not going to change your life. But there are people who are coming and making presentations this evening, and I think that they deserve respect after the considerable amount of work that they've done on a very important subject matter. So I would like to call upon Sarah Ban from Deloitte to please approach the podium this evening and proceed with your presentation of your findings with regards to the value for money service audit report and review. And the floor is yours.
Excellent.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall and Council for having me this evening. I'm here to present the results of our value for money service audit. We were engaged by the city under your direction to perform the value for service money audit for the past 3 calendar years, including fiscal year 2021, 2022, and 2023 for the County of Simcoe's financial information specific to the Municipal Services Management Agreement between the city and the county. The scope of the engagement, excuse me while I move us ahead. The scope of the engagement was outlined in 4 points: to assess the compliance with the Municipal Services Management Agreement between the county and the city in relation to the actual costs allocated over the past 3 years and the required performance reporting of third-party service providers; to assess the provincial and federal grants and other revenues received by the county over the same time period, that they have been appropriately and proportionately allocated to the services provided specifically within the city in relation to the demands throughout the county and the 2 separated cities of Barrie and Orillia; to assess using benchmarking data from other like communities or separated cities whether the city is receiving comparable value for service for the regional services provided under the agreement; and to assess and make recommendations on the cost-sharing methodology, whether it's in line with leading practices, provincial guidelines, and requirements, and objectively ensure a fair and reasonable partnership between the county and the city. To do this, I will walk us through the executive summary on page 4. To do this, we set out under 4 objectives aligned with those 4 requests from the city. The first objective was the analysis of the county's compliance with the Municipal Services Management Agreement. Procedure 1.1 was to perform a risk-based assessment on third-party entities providing shared services on behalf of the county to assess their compliance with the Municipal Service Management Agreement in terms of actual costs over these past 3 years. We noted that the cost-sharing allocation as set out by the agreement uses either a caseload allocation, a weighted tax assessment, or a combination thereof. During our procedures, we recalculated the allocation rates and the allocated costs for those 3 years without noting any differences. This allowed us to conclude that the county is compliant with the Municipal Services Management Agreement in terms of actual costs allocated for the shared services over this time period. Our second procedure was set out to perform interviews with key stakeholders at the county to understand and document the processes that they are taking to ensure vendors are compliant with their contracts for children's services, community services, and social housing. In our procedures, we held interviews with the county's General Manager of Social and Community Services Division, the Director of Children's Services, the Director of Community Services, and the Manager of Housing Programs to understand and document their compliance review process. This allowed us to conclude that the county has processes in place to monitor third-party vendor compliance against the contracts and legislation required for these shared services, for, in particular, children's services, community services, and social housing. Moving on to our second objective was the evaluation of the allocation of revenues and the to the cost of the share service as well as a KPI analysis. Procedure 2.1 was to receive a summary of the provincial and federal grants and other non-tax revenues received by the county in this time period and compare them against the grants allocated to the city. During this procedure, we noted that the revenue sharing allocation matched the cost sharing allocation rates as noted in Objective 1. We recalculate these allocation rates and the allocated revenues over the 3 periods without noting any differences. This allowed us to conclude that the county is compliant with the agreement between the city and the county in terms of the grants allocated for the shared services in this time period. Our second procedure of Objective 2 was to perform an analytical procedure on the allocation of gross costs to the services delivered relative to the overall costs of the services delivered. During this analysis, Deloitte performed an analysis of administrative costs versus direct costs for the 7 service areas. Deloitte noted that children's services, community services, and social housing were primarily delivered through third-party vendors, whereas paramedics, long-term care, Ontario Works, and the local housing corporation were delivered directly by the county. From our analysis, it appears that the Simcoe's administrative overhead of gross costs for all of the shared services ranged between a rate of 1.1% to 7.2% over the time period. Direct gross costs to third-party vendor costs were demonstrated in a percentage of 33% in 2021, 41% in 2022, or 46% of the overall total costs of deploying these social services in 2023. Our final procedure in Objective 2 was to analyze the impact of the revenues to the results of the KPIs under the contracted services within the agreement based on the split between services provided to the City of Barrie, Aurelia, and the county. Deloitte was able to compare key performance indicators tracked by the county against the nature and percentage of the cost-sharing arrangements within the agreement to glean the following insights. Based on the selected KPIs for shared services, it appears that the city is a net recipient for paramedic services, community services, social housing, whereas it is not a net recipient for long-term care and child services. Provided that Ontario Works is done solely on a caseload allocation, the City of Barrie's received costs and benefits appear appropriate. Our third objective was to perform a comparator analysis of the shared services provided by this County of Simcoe. This was to look at the key performance indicators and against the services provided by the county with other similar municipalities within Ontario. We compared the services and cost performance metrics for the County of Simcoe, Wellington County, and the Regional Municipality of Waterloo using publicly available information to benchmark services provided to the citizens. Based on the comparator analysis, the municipalities and the chosen KPIs, it appears that the County of Simcoe has lower costs to providing paramedic services, community services, and social housing, whereas scores on average for Ontario Works and children's services. In addition, it appears that the municipally funded long-term care beds are more accessible within the County of Simcoe compared to the Regional Municipality of Waterloo and Wellington counties, as the County of Simcoe offer a higher number of beds in comparison and relative to their population. Finally, in conclusion, in the fourth objective, based on the information we've gleaned through the first 3 objectives, we were to make recommendations for consideration for the future municipal service management agreement, particularly around the cost-sharing methodology within the operations in developing recommendations for the city. Additionally, we were requested to review the proposed capital allocation method. Based on our analysis performed in objectives 2 and 3, we did note that it appears that the city is receiving more than expected levels of services from paramedics, community services, and social housing, both the local housing corporation and not-for-profit service providers, based on the cost-sharing agreement. It was also noted that based on the comparative analysis to other municipalities, that the city is receiving fair and reasonable value for the services provided by the county when being compared. Deloitte noted that the proposed capital allocation method had not been formally documented and therefore found it difficult to provide firm comments on that. We would encourage that any potential changes to the capital allocation method be formally communicated and documented, as well as supported by a robust analysis. I thank you for your time to present our results, and I will pause for questions.
Thank you so much. And for those who've had the opportunity to go through the report, you'll realize how detailed it is and how much information there is. I'm actually going to start council off on some questions, if it's okay with council, because there's just some things I wanted to confirm through this. On page 37 of the report, it shows a comparison between 21, 22, and 23, and in that shows the total gross costs associated with all of the services. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor. The total is the total direct costs of the shared services that we studied through the agreement.
And so essentially, it's for 2023, $112 million of services delivered by the County of Simcoe to the City of Barrie. Is that what I'm understanding that to?
Give me 1 minute,
problem.
to confirm that.
No problem, thank you.
Yes, that appears to be correct.
Okay, so for long-term care, for social services, and for paramedic care, the total cost to run those three umbrellas, and there's sub-umbrellas, is $112 million. And the administration fee that is charged by the county is $4.37 million, or roughly 3.9% of the total cost. And is that, am I interpreting that 3.9% in terms of administration cost correctly?
Based on the County of Simcoe's accounting classifications, we deemed that the 3.9% was allocated to administrative nature of expenses.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, and that's very low, so that's a positive thing to show. The other piece that I wanted to ask is, were you able to dig a level deeper than that, in the sense that there's the administration that the county does on behalf of the City of Barrie, but then there's administration inside of the organizations that are contracted to deliver the services below? Is that incorporated in that 3.9%, or is there then below that the administration for each of the services that are actually on the ground providing the services?
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. The scope of work did not, allow us to or require us to obtain information directly from the third-party service providers. And essentially, the $4.37 million is only county costs.
Okay, so from a total system perspective, and there's multiple systems we're talking about in here, this would include the paramedic system, for instance, 100%. It would include the long-term care system, 100% of the administration costs associated. But when it comes to social service side, there's going to be administrative costs that you, inside of the request from us, weren't privy to at this point.
Unable to conclude on that at this point.
Yeah, okay, thank you. The other question I had was with regards to there's a multitude of tables that show the cost for the City of Barrie for a specific service, and then it also showed the grants associated with those costs. Then you get the net cost after the grant. And it's really easy to understand in the sense that it's a percentage of whatever we have agreed to inside of that management agreement with the County of Simcoe. But there's some outliers in the actual agreement with the County of Simcoe, and I assume you weren't retained to advise on the agreement itself with the County of Simcoe, but rather is the relationship and the delivery happening in line with the agreement that has previously been signed?
In short, yes. We applied our calculations based on the methodology as outlined, recalculating whether it be a weighted taxable assessment allocation, caseload assessment, or caseload allocation, or the blended caseload and weighted tax assessment allocation, not providing any comments about how those allocations were determined.
Okay. So when we have, for instance, in the Ontario Works, we're paying based on the percentage of cases / cases managed, and it's 45% or 44%, I'm just going on memory, I don't have it in front of me, that the city's responsible for. And that's a fairly accurate year over year. It swings up and down, and I assume it's based on the previous year's results for the preceding year. Then when we move over to paramedic services, it's based on, not on the, calls for service, but on the demographics or the population base. When we go over to long-term care, it's on the population base as well. And you have a slide, I think it's pages 38 and 39 for members of council, that shows, it really clearly delineates where the City of Barrie is receiving excess service than funding we provide, and where we're receiving less service than funding provided. But it doesn't include the portion which we actually just already accurately pay, which is the Ontario Works portion. So there's a 4 or 5 that say, this is more than expected. I think there's 4 or 5 that say this is less than expected, and it shows that. But what I saw in that was that when it comes to the social services, it is more funding than expected. And then when it goes across to long-term care beds or children's services, it's less than expected. Meaning that and if I'm reading this correctly, you can interrupt me at any point if I'm not reading this correctly, meaning that the investments that are taking place where we're receiving more are primarily associated with shelter beds and the rampant homelessness that's affecting the entire country at this point. And where we're receiving less funding is related to children and seniors. Is that overall accurate?
It's difficult to, I guess, simplify it to that degree, given the nature of each of those services. Having said that, given our analysis, that you are reading it correctly.
Okay. All right. The final piece, and it was actually on your slide where you had the conclusions along the bottom.
That is slide 4 for those who have it in front of them. Yep, there we go.
Yes. So the conclusions, now 4.2, and this was a question that the CAO and I had chatted about a ways back, and I think got added into the request for scope on this specific report. And I want to drill down here because there's two things. We had this conversation over at the county yesterday morning, and it wasn't received perhaps as well as I might have thought. But in here, the report, 4.2, says the city should ensure that any potential changes to the current capital allocation method are formally communicated and documented during the meetings of the Committee of the Whole, which happened yesterday, folks. There is an opportunity to revise the current capital allocation method based on actual capital asset useful life, actual usage of the capital asset by the resident municipality, and actual costs incurred, including interest. And so your recommendation is that as we are negotiating back with the county, that we need to open this piece of the agreement to align our contributions with the life of the capital asset that's being either purchased or built. Is that correct?
I'd highlight two things. One, at the basis of our analysis, we were provided a very brief potential capital asset allocation, and therefore the depth of the analysis was probably not as fulsome as we could have had it, should it be documented, and that I knew what it was at the direction of your council as well as the council of the county of Simcoe. And as such, we were able to sort of make broad stroke recommendations, and in line where understanding that these capital assets have lengthy, depending on the city's objectives and what is in your best interest, you would weigh sort of that 10-year amortization period against other options of understanding that those capital assets would have much longer useful lives than the 10 years and will likely be in operations for much longer. And therefore, prior to making any changes and when you do go through negotiations of this report, that robust analysis should be performed.
Okay. So I'm just going to jump to Mr. Prowse. I have not prepped our CAO on this, so I apologize. And you may have to refer to another member of our team. What's the average debenture life that the City of Barrie deals in? Is it 30 year? Is it 25? Is it 35 year?
Mr. 10.
10 years?
10 years.
So the average amortization period of when we build a rec center, we do it on a 10-year basis?
Most of the ventures that we've issued in the last 10 years have been 10 years. We had some in 2010, 2011, 2012, which were 30 years, 40 years, and 20 years.
Yeah.
But we typically try and match the average asset life.
Okay, so you're matching the asset life to the debenture. And the 2012, that would have been what, the fire station?
The water surface plant, I think.
Sorry, Mayor Nuttall, I think Mr. Gillespie's right. I think it was the surface water treatment plant.
Okay. And our debentures that we put on, let's say, the rec centers, they were 10 years for Peggy Hill and 10 years for East Bayfield?
I'll have to look at that. I'm not sure on those ones.
Okay.
Mayor Nuttall, sorry, just we can confirm that. I believe before we did the surface water treatment plant, our standard was 10 years. Surface water treatment plant, I believe we did 40 years, which was exceptional, but the price tag was exceptional.
Okay. Can we find out, because that's new information to me, that's interesting. Can we find out when we negotiated, was the 10 years our request to align with our own internal policies, or was it something from the other side? Because I'm assuming these buildings, for the most part, when you're building a, I don't know, it's going to be 230 million or some odd on Rose Street, aren't a 10-year debenture that's being undertaken.
Mayor Nutt will be happy to endeavor to determine that. Who initiated that may be difficult, but we'll see what we can find out for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all I have. Are there other questions from members of council on the value for service? Yep, Councillor Kungle.
Thank you for the presentation and appreciate the degree of detail. In just looking at some of the information, in case I missed it, was there anything there that took into consideration points of time over those 3 years where we were capped by the province on some of that kind of service funding? I know we've seen the county receive some funding in year. And so does that play a part around context or consideration around service volumes or kind of value for money? I know when we look at slightly low, I mean, the percentage is not far off. So I'm very happy with the detail, but didn't know if Deloitte looked at that.
During our process, we did not normalize for any outside forces, including provincial funding changes or whatnot. Within Objective 2, when we did look at revenues, all of the revenues would have been included, and so that would include any additional federal or provincial funding at that point of time.
Okay. And just to clarify, for point of time, did that capture that adjustment in this year, or did that come after the process started? So was that missed around adjustments for the provincial changes? I think it might have been to Ontario Works.
Given that we are looking at the historical period, so for 21, 22, and 23, we took those as actuals. And so I was provided with the actual data for those time periods with no information being analyzed for fiscal 2024.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. My only other question would be, is there anything else to add further, just in the context of, it might be foreign to some members of the public watching or having considerations, when you looked at potential next steps might be around looking at capital allocation method and review. So could you clarify that a little bit, or what that would include when we talked a little bit about that being maybe a little bit of a limitation on the depth of information I believe you might have?
Well, I first would note is the excellent working relationship between the City of Barrie and the County of Simcoe staff. So I very much thank them for their support during this engagement through the summer months of vacations and whatnot, and getting us to this point. So that would be something that I would encourage the city not to lose in terms of the effectiveness of this agreement. Again, we were quite limited as it relates to the capital assessment, given what was written in paper, and it is difficult for us to provide an analysis and recommendation on, I guess, staff report that we know is not effective in written form.
Thank you. No further questions. Just again, a comment. I mean, from how you've laid it out very clearly, it helps us to identify compliance. I think from the public transparency around value for money, the min level is impressive to me about how that's managed for the services provided, and understand the conditions of those services that are done through county direct departments versus third party. So I appreciate the detail and time you went into providing that back.
You're very welcome.
I have Councillor Harvey, then I'll have Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Thank you for your presentation, and I think I'm going to get walloped later for that one. But just curious, because you had a lot of information here, but it appears that the overview was more of a macro overview opposed to more of a micro overview. Because where I see some concerns that doesn't provide the info that I would have hoped for is in things like Ontario Works. Because to truly understand whether you're paying your fair share for something like that, I would have liked to have seen, like, because obviously being one of the urban centers and the largest urban center in this county, a lot of people tend to come here because of the services that are available. As a result, I highly suspect that we end up inheriting a lot of people from around the county, and as a result have now an address and are now a client in Ontario Works in our area, which would automatically inflate how much our percentage is when it comes to Ontario Works, let's say. Was that type of stuff looked at all?
I think given the scope that as it was outlined, we did not take it to that micro level in terms of that type of analysis.
Great, thank you. And I guess the other thing that I would have hoped, especially using the terminology value for money, and obviously the Rose Street project is a very much needed project, but again, like the one in Aurelia, that they had to come back and ask for significant increases to the budget originally. Now with Rose Street, we're looking at just a smidgen over $1 million a unit. When just down the street at Lack House, we've got waterfront units at $1 million a unit. I assume that things like that were not looked at when it comes to value for money, also when it comes to the use of the money opposed to are you paying your fair share? Would I be fair in saying that?
The focus of the review was on the historical 3 years of the data that we were provided under the implementation of the services agreement. We did look at the accessibility of services in our comparative or in our KPI review in hopes to drive that value for money lens. It can be applied in many different ways under different scopes as well.
Great, thank you. And just as a little savior for myself, I would like a shout out to the Lehmans who are sitting in the crowd, and that's why I had Lehman on the brain for some reason, but glad to see you're here. Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Councillor Prince.
I don't mind that one. I don't mind that one.
Councillor Morales.
I don't mind any of them. We're a good group in Ward 9. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. That was funny. The presenter has no idea what we're talking about. So question 4.2, if IT could get 4.2 back up. You picked the one I had a question on, which is good. People are going to think I'm just copying you, but it's important. So let's discuss it when IT gets it up there about the capital reallocation. So I'll kind of start it when it goes up. So you said that there's an opportunity to essentially rebalance the capital allocation and the lifespan, the useful lifespan with interest rates and other costs. As an extension to Mayor Nuttall's point about like maybe we're paying off too quickly, we're amortizing too quickly some of our assets. Does Deloitte also look at the analysis that maybe we're not fully grasping the long-term cost of repair, rehabilitation, and rebuilding, the long-term cost of ownership of other assets, and I mean specifically roads, sewers, infrastructure, with the kind of development that we're getting? Here's what I mean by that. Suburban development is more expensive than more dense development. Doesn't have to be giant towers, but suburban development, lots of content out there, a couple of planners, lots of planners in the crowd today, so you'll understand that some people refer to suburban development as essentially a Ponzi scheme, because you pay for the roads and the few homes of density with big backyards and waterfront properties, et cetera, they don't necessarily pay for the infrastructure that goes into doing that, because the density isn't there when it have to be redone. So does Deloitte look at the lifespan costs of the suburban expansion that we've had so far, and does it get into nitty-gritty detail where you say, hey, Barrie, you're on the right track. You're approving enough density when you're building into secondary lands, and it's not going to be as scary in 30, 40, 50 years, or on the flip side, maybe, hey, you're not doing enough density, and some of the existing, let's call it North Barrie infrastructure that we're seeing continually be rehabilitated, you're just going to keep putting it on the proverbial credit card. I'm wondering if Deloitte goes into that kind of analysis, because while I appreciate it 4.2 for infrastructure and assets that are building based, I'm wondering too if we're on a sustainable trajectory towards our development.
Thank you for your question. I will, Councillor Morales, I will clarify in that we did not mention that there's a rebalancing of terms or to payment. It would be looking at matching, based on the actual useful life or the use of the capital asset by residents, weighed with other pros and cons of timings of cash flow. Having said that, to your question of if Deloitte can, yes, we are capable, but that service was not within this current scope.
Oh, Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll find a better time. The reason I'm just going to add a little color to this. For years, and it's not a lack of wanting to, it's hard to quantify that because, but there obviously is an impact. And it doesn't mean that there's no more suburbia in Ward 9 in other areas. That's not the case. Doesn't mean we're coming after existing one. What it means is that there's a cost, and we want to know what that cost is. So it's interesting that Deloitte and the private sector can provide that analysis. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Morales. Any other questions from members of committee? I have one quick follow-up. This is actually, I'm stealing from the Deputy Mayor on this. The interest that's, that accrues and is then expensed inside of, let's say, the social housing portion for, let's say, Rose Street in the future. There's a build that the county's doing there. The city's on the hook for essentially 25% of that, happily. And if they debenture under the current agreement, if they, let's say, did a 35-year debenture on the remaining, I don't know, let's say it's 100 million out of the 200 million, how does that interest get charged back in? Is it charged into like an operating account, or is it kept separate as a capital interest expense that is only paid for by the county municipalities? So the City of Barrie is not essentially being charged back as part of the program for the interest to cover the rest of the building when we're paying ours over in a quicker timeline.
I appreciate your question. Unfortunately, I don't have the relevant information in front of me to make that conclusion, and I may defer to management to have any further comment.
Go ahead.
So, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to my knowledge, the interest, how the county funds their projects, if they fund it with debentures, they pay the interest cost on that. What we pay is our portion of it, and whatever, you know, if we're paying over 10 years, and we're paying not as more quickly than the county is, they will charge us interest based on the Infrastructure Ontario 10-year rate, which could be the same or different if we were to have debentures, not for these projects because we don't own the capital, but we could be different rates on us for debenturing other assets instead of this.
So the contribution that we put in is the 50 million plus the interest accrued over the 10-year amortization payment of that, and the interest that they then accrue over 15 years to whatever it is completely separate. It's not charged back into the operating expense, because when we have debentures, right, on a rec center, those, as I understand it, those interest costs in the city, they hit us on the operating budget. And so I just want to confirm that that's not the case over at the county, and we're not then, you know, kind of paying on both sides.
To my knowledge, that is correct. I will follow up to be 100% sure, but I don't believe that we are paying for what they are, however they are funding their portion of the costs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, I didn't see any other questions. Thank you so much for your presentation and for answering all those questions this evening, and for the wealth of knowledge and work that was done on this subject. It's now, as I said earlier, we had Deputy Mayor Thompson who put the motion on the floor, so it's now open for debate. Are there comments or questions that, go ahead, Councillor Kunkel.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just a question of staff on the topic, as part of the content noted, our current agreement expired, I believe, a couple years ago, and then we've been living within the existing conditions while we were looking at conversations with the county, and I believe then council actioning this review. What is the next step from here? Did this next step trigger then staff going back to then set the conditions on the next service agreement, or does that need direction as well? To CEO Prowse, if I may.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kunkel. Councillor Kunkel, any discussions around the service agreement were paused while we commenced the service for value for service delivery review. Now that that has been completed, staff will re-engage with county on these, on the service agreement.
Thank you, CEO Prouse. No, just pleased to see the information out of it. I don't have any concerns. Everything that I'm hearing, I don't need any more follow-up for information. I think be a good resource that staff take into that conversation. So do want to thank again Deloitte for that, but also with that information coming to light, I was very pleased with it around the compliance that was identified and the funding and the service levels. I mean, it is a complex service agreement with different conditions based on the service provider. I know we've had, we get into conversations about housing and different aspects and who's paying for what share. And we know that, I think I want to comment just from having been on county council last term, the, really open conversations that were part of a larger system. And so sometimes that means looking at who's the best to support the investment. And so the Rose Street development and others, I'm happy to see that that is happening in Barrie, and members of county council supported that. So I've got no changes in support receiving the document.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. I think that there's a few things from this that we got what we asked for. And that isn't necessarily what we were asking for. And I'll go a little deeper on that, what I mean. I think for me, I'll speak for myself on this, what I was looking for is something that went a little bit deeper to understand what are the administrative costs totally of our system, where are the silos, and how can we rebase so everybody's at the same table working together. And I know that it's a conversation I've had too many times with Councillor Hamilton over the last couple of years. And so while this says, okay, the invoices sent to the city and the payments therefore made to the county are accurately reflecting the agreement that was in place. What it doesn't say is what happens the next level down. And I think for me that continues to be a concern. It continues to be a concern because inevitably we get asked to provide funding to things like a system on a roof of a shelter, and with no understanding of the financial situation associated. And that to me is a bit of a concern. That's where my concern stemmed in the beginning. I don't think anyone at the county goes to work in the morning and says, we're gonna, take money from the City of Barrie and laughs about it. What my concern is, and the question I always ask myself is there enough money in the system to meet the demand and need of these services? And if there is, are we seeing those results on the ground that reflect that? And, some of this is nothing to do with funding and nothing to do with the county, and it's now to do with the judiciary. But some of it, I think, we have seen some positive movement and change management from the county, and some of it, I think, we still want more. But the report that we have in front of us doesn't really tell us that, nor does it go into it. So there's a wealth of information. I know a lot more about this now than I did before the report was done, which is a positive. And I think members of council probably echo that. But I don't feel like I can sit here and say that we are as efficient and effective at social services as we can be, or we're efficient and effective on long-term care as we could be. And it is actually clearly stated that we're underperforming in that category. we're overperforming in paramedic services. I would love to see the data for paramedic services related to our most vulnerable citizens, many who are from Barrie, many who are not from Barrie, and start to create and paint that picture of what it actually looks like. But I fear that the cost of that would be immense. And I fear that it would take a very, 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 very long time. And I think that we have to take this information, accept it as is, and the rest is a negotiation between the county and the city and council through whatever agreement we come to or don't come to, doing the best on the information we have. Otherwise, we're going to punt this thing down the road for another 24 months. And if there's one thing I know about systems, it's that the more instability there is, the less effective it is. So we need to have some sort of stability around this going forward. So that is not a criticism of the work that was done, just to confirm. I'm very happy with the work that was done. I just felt it needed to go deeper in order to be able to get a fulsome picture. So if there's no other comments or questions, I will call the vote, which, if you'll give me a moment here, I'll read it out just so that we are all on the same page. It's that 1, Deloitte's value for money service audit report be received for information, and 2, that the recommendations regarding the capital allocation method be considered by staff in the negotiations of the new municipal services management agreement with the County of Simcoe. So this is your time to state anything different than negotiate that piece into our agreement. And I'm seeing no comments, so we'll call the vote. All those in favor? It carries. We'll now go to the second item that was held. I believe Deputy Mayor, I believe the second item was Councillor Negussi. If you could put the item on the floor and then we can discuss it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Nadal. I'm going to put item on the floor. Quick question to staff, probably Ms. Bamfield. On page 4, under community safety, addressing speeding and aggressive driving to ensure straight and pedestrian safety, the note says staff in traffic service investigate the top 10 intersections and road segments based on collision data each year, and target is to reduce crash rate by 25% cumulative. So since traffic and speeding is a grown concern in our community, I'm just wondering what kind of criteria are used by traffic service staff to identify the top 10 intersections and road segments for investigation each year. And my other question is, I'm very much interested to know how does a traffic service plan to achieve a cumulative 25% reduction in crash rate at the higher collision location?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Negussi. So those items that you referenced were staff's attempt to try to get some sort of performance indicators around traffic safety. It's been something that council has asked for. So for example, how would staff identify the top 10 intersections? We would use a formula that would take a look at the traffic volume and the vehicle collisions to basically have the highest rate of both of those, and that would determine a crash rate and what that looked like. In terms of trying to do a reduction of that, we would then use that data to look at these specific locations and see when see if there was a pattern, and we could see if the accidents were happening at a particular time and if there was anything that we could do at a staff level to try to do sort of safety measures to try to reduce those types of accidents. And then, collision data, I believe council is very familiar with. We rely on that collision data when you're asking us to take a look at either perhaps a new stop sign or the need for a set of lights or intersections. And we look at that data and then we say, if there's a pattern again, like if there were 5 accidents and they were all because there wasn't an all-way stop. If it could have been corrected by an all-way stop, then we bring that back. So staff use the data and work with Barrie Police for different reasons, but we definitely try to use that data as rationale for safety measures that we either recommend or in some cases don't recommend action be taken. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Nettle, and thank you, Councillor Negussi, for holding this item. I did want to just say a thank you to staff. I appreciated you guys going back to the table and including some comparative data targets on the existing KPIs. I think was very helpful, and it makes those KPIs more meaningful to us as we really look at our performance and how we're doing by being able to compare to the additional data provided. So thank you. I also looked at the additional list of KPIs that were suggested as possible additions, and I liked a couple of them. I thought a couple of them were actually more meaningful than what is currently listed within our strategic plan. The one that Councillor Negussi just mentioned under community safety, reduction in crash rate for highest rating intersections. Again, I think, that traffic, speeding, accidents is probably one of the number one concerns that we all get. And I like having, a target there to reduce by 25% by watching the top 10. So that to me is one that I actually would consider adding to our existing list of KPIs for 2025. I think that was what you said. If we were to change them, we would be adding them to 2025. So that was one, and I don't have it written up as an amendment tonight, but I'd be open to other people's comments on that. The other ones that I liked, responsible governance, so looking at the total cost avoidance associated with the continuous improvement initiatives. Again, I think from a financial stewardship perspective, that's a good one and becoming more common from a governance perspective in terms of actually looking at improvement initiatives as a way to cut down costs and monitoring that. So again, I thought that was a very meaningful one under responsible governance that is missing from our current list of KPIs. The third one I liked was infrastructure investments, infrastructure capital plan amount approved and amount spent. So again, looking at your actual capital spending as a percentage of your total budget. That was the third one. And the final one was the percentage implementation of the community safety and well-being plan. And that one, because just based on the past history of that plan and really a lot of work that went into it, and then we never actually kind of tracked it or looked at it in implementation. I know we're spending time and energy now to develop a new community safety and well-being plan. And again, I would consider that as part of our KPIs too. So just throwing it out there, those are the 4 that I liked. Happy to have dialogue, happy to chat offline after tonight. But the more I look at this and based on kind of what Negussi's questions were too, I think it's probably worthwhile to look at our current list of KPIs and how we could improve them by using comparative data, by using targets, and by using some of these suggestions here. My one question I actually would ask staff, out of the list provided, and I know there was nothing in the report saying we recommend any of these, they were just listed as suggested. Is there any that staff would actually recommend over others? Was there a couple that you would highlight, or was this just a general list for our consideration? I don't know who I'm directing that to or who would be Sarah.
I'll take that if you want. Through you, Mayor Nettle, to Councillor Hamilton. They're really all developed in consultation with department heads and SLT, EMT members as all good potential suggestions to add to the existing, to add or replace existing KPIs. So really, it's at council's discretion, which you will find most meaningful to establish indicators relevant to your strategic priorities.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I apologize. I probably should have been more prepared tonight to actually put something forward, but I wanted to kind of assess the dialogue. So I'll take it away and maybe follow up with staff and others to really look at for next week putting something together.
Yes, I have Councillor Corso first before I have Councillor Morales. I would just ask Councillor Hamilton, because I know it's something that you're going to want to do, maybe if you could try to circulate it by like Monday at 5 to give everybody that time, if that's okay.
Yeah, happy to do so.
Okay, awesome. Councillor Corser.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Nettle, to, I guess, Ms. Banfield. I'd like to thank you and your team for pulling this together, because I know that I was asking a lot of questions on this, and I didn't appreciate how complicated it was to actually get these kind of numbers and these kind of KPIs. I thought traffic would be a very simple thing to do, but it's not. But also a question. So I know that there's a few news articles over the years, a yearly release of the most dangerous intersections in the city, and it's usually released by local police detachments and departments. Is this the information that, I know I'm kind of throwing that at you, and you're obviously not looking at what I'm looking at. Is this where the information will come from for the intersections? It'll be through the Barrie Police Department, Barrie Police Services would be the one providing that information?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, yes, we believe we'll be working with the police and their data.
And, just a follow-up, if I may. And with the traffic speeding cameras, will that be, can we work that in somehow? Another conversation, would it be, do you believe that we would be able to use that information for how we're testing speeding in these areas, in community safety zones, to maybe be another KPI? Would that be something that maybe we could look at?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. So staff do respond to council through memos in terms of the data collected through the automated speed enforcement cameras. Collision data, they're basically different tools, I guess is the easiest way to say it. The automated speed enforcement cameras are supposed to slow people down, not necessarily stop accidents. And partially the reason that it took us a bit of time to get our minds around what a KPI could be is the fact that staff are supposed to have the ability to influence the outcome and show improvement. It's very difficult for staff to make people drive slower. We do all sorts of things to try to make them do that. So this is why this is the way it's worded the way it is. We'll see where the accidents are. We'll take a look at the safety. We'll see if there are things staff can do to look at the accidents and slow it down or what have you. But that's the key with the traffic safety, is that it's difficult for staff to be responsible for the drivers in the City of Barrie.
Thank you. And as like I said, of our discussions we had, I thought it would be an easy ask, but it certainly was not. So thank you very much for the hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Corser, and now Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. I just wanted to make a very quick comment because I don't recall if Mr. McGregor and Ms. Rear were in the room for our previous meeting. But I just wanted to commend specifically you, Ms. Rear. Thank you for the report. I know it's authored by you. Everything goes up the food chain, but just wanted to obviously to acknowledge that. Lots of millennials at the podiums today, so I just want to recognize that. But specifically, I had not made the connection. Maybe that's where subconsciously I did. I love the green, yellow, red. And earlier, yeah, exactly. It all comes full circle. So if it's good enough for staff and it's good enough for council, it could potentially, we'll let staff decide, that could be good enough for the private sector with some of that development stuff as it interlaces with the process. So that's really good to see, makes it more palatable and kind of gives people a gut check on where the KPIs are.
Thank you, Councillor, and I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? And it carries. So we are going to move on to DEV 047-24 that was held by Councillor Nixon. This is the zoning bylaw amendment application for 19 Dundonald Street. Councillor Nixon, if you could put the motion on the floor, and then it's yours to speak.
Very well, thank you. Through you, Mayor Nuttall. First of all, I want to thank Ms. Banfield's team.
Sorry, Councillor Nixon, I need you to put the motion on the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, then that'll be second of all. I'll put the motion on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay.
First of all, I want to thank Michelle Banfield's team for the time and effort to review and prepare that staff report. I understand the parameters that you have to work with, and I understand it's not an easy job. To say the least, this has been a major issue over the past few years, several years, for the residents in the area. It was a very hot topic during the election, knocking on doors. I saw more lawn signs in opposition to the development than all the candidate signs combined. I also want to thank the developer for making some recent changes to the proposal in an attempt to accommodate some of the concerns. You know, it's a fine-looking building. I know we need more density. It's close to public transit. It's one of the few I've seen that actually has greater than one-to-one parking, and checks off many of the boxes for what we need, except one very important one. The Dundonald Hill, that section of Dundonald Street, is the steepest hill in town, and therein lies the dilemma. I've traveled up and down that hill hundreds of times, but only once in the winter. That was the first time. And the last time, it was kind of a slippery early morning, and I haven't been back until spring. I firmly believe that what we need to do everything in our power to minimize traffic on dangerous streets. And that steep hill can be, many times of the year, a dangerous street. Not increase it. So I think, if anything, we need to find ways to divert traffic from dangerous areas. And I believe those around the table and those keeping score at home know that I very rarely, if ever, take issue with staff reports. And that's because of the respect I have for the people who prepare them. But this will be one of those rare times. I will not be supporting the staff report. I urge my colleagues around the table to do the same. And I would like to put an amendment on the floor that the application be denied.
Thank you, Councillor. The amendment's on the floor for the application to be denied. And before we move on to members of council, I'm going to weigh in on this one myself. This is what I see as a problem in not just the idea of Dundonald Hill, although I was thinking before about other places in the city that we've had similar problems. And if you'll remember, before there was a grade change over at Little and Huronia, that hill where the train tracks are, it was atrocious. It's still bad, but it was atrocious. And I can't imagine putting a development on the side of that. There was also Big Bay Point Road, for those who've been here long enough, before it was evened out quite a bit and a new bridge was put in crossing Hewitt's Creek, Lover's Creek. It was atrocious, and we actually have development proposals there now, but it's coming out not onto a massive hill, halfway down a massive hill. It's coming out onto a fairly flat road because of those changes that were made to make it safer. The reality is there's no change that's going to happen that makes Dundonald Hill safer. This is the way it is. It's not going to change. And so I fully agree with what Councillor Nixon has said in terms of what he both said in his statements, but also in the amendment. The other piece I really struggle with is the idea that we have to say yes to everything all the time. I don't think that's true. A couple of months ago, I was sitting at a dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Lehman, who are here as well, and Bob and I had this conversation. It's like, when development happens in the city, we should feel like it's adding to the already awesome city, not like it's changing the awesome city. And this is one of those developments where the safety issue is an issue for me, but the secondary issue is that I just don't think that this even tries to fit into the community. I just don't think it respects the community. I can remember knocking on doors as a gentleman here. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, sir, but we talked on your front lawn there when you were cutting your grass, and it was like a very consistent message that said, we're not against people having multi-unit. Go through the East End. There's tons of multi-unit properties, but they're built in a way that they respect the community around them, and they're part of the community, not over the community. And I think that for this one, for me, I just can't support it. And the comments that I'm making on this singular development tonight will be reflected in the eventual zoning bylaw conversation as well, because I have real trouble with going to the folks who've invested their life savings, taken on mortgages that are bigger than anyone ever dreamed to own a home in Barrie, and then saying, oh, by the way, we're changing absolutely everything. It creates instability. It's a lack of respect for people and everything they've put into their homes. We have to create homes for people because that's the environment we're in, and we're doing that. We don't have to do it everywhere, all the time, every time somebody asks. So I'll leave my comments there. I saw Councillor Corser next, and then I'll go to Councillor Harvey and Councillor Harris. I've got...
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Mayor Nuttall and Councillor Nixon's comments about the absolute horrendous road that is there. I'm born and raised Barrie, and I, like many, have gone down that road once only in the winter. And when I was leaving my house this evening to come to council, I'm very fortunate that my next door neighbor is a long-time Barrie resident going, and their family has been for many generations. And the stories I've heard of people dying on that hill are pretty horrendous too. Beyond the safety, I agree with Mayor Nuttall that this just does not fit in this area. It feels like a bit of a shoehorn, and we don't have to say yes to everything. And besides, I don't think this would be a very affordable development anyway, and that's what we need is affordable housing. So I'm definitely a no on this issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. I've now got Councillor Harvey, then Harris, then Kungle.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Originally, I really didn't give much thought to it, never really thought that it didn't fit until I did have a call from Councillor Nixon about this, and we got talking and kind of bantered back and forth because at first he wasn't selling me. But the more and more that I thought about it, and really looking at it, because I'll be quite honest with you, until this application came through quite some time ago, I'd never even been on the street. And then same thing, when I came down off that top of that hill, I was like, wow, this is one steep hill that is probably more best fit for a ski hill opposed to a street. And as a result, I will support this in not moving forward because of it's really the safety issue that really plays on me. It intersects with Collier Street with a stop sign. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's umpteen people that have slid through that in the winter months. There's no ability to put another set of lights for all the extra traffic that's going to be coming out of these two driveways with this building because of its proximity. And also, too, even if we did have the ability to put a set of lights there, I don't know that people would actually be able to stop in time during those icy bad weather. And I would hope that this street is prioritized when it comes to our operations in the winter when it comes to salting. Because it by far, like I thought the hill at Essa Road was bad when I first moved to Barrie. And then when I went down Dundonald, I went, it just gives you a whole other perspective driving down a hill like that in a car. So as a result, I will support, but I just want a point of clarity actually. Is the motion on the table now to defeat it? Or are we voting on the original motion and then just voting against it? Just so that way we're all clear here.
So right now, the amendment is on the floor, which is to deny the application. If that amendment is approved, we'll then go through to the main motion, and at that point, the main motion will also be the amended main motion to deny.
Okay, great, thanks. I just want to make sure so that way we're all clear. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Harris?
Great, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I never got a call from Councillor Nixon. I feel a little left out, to be honest, so I'm just going to put that out there. Yeah, thank you. Maybe through you, Mayor Nuttall, just to staff to give some kind of color on, as the report reads, and the area definitely, and we know the area has 8-story buildings. It has height and has a mix, and it's really quite a unique and special area in that sense. And I use it often when I reference other areas in my ward where there's some gentle density being mid-rise being promoted or developers being presented. And I often refer to Kempenfeld Drive and seeing the apartment buildings there, and obviously 8 stories being the height. But with that said, as planners, as city planners, the grade of the road, we've all noted the grade of the road. I think I grew up in Barrie, and we called it the super test with your bike. Could you ride down that hill and survive it? That was kind of the test. But as planners, where does that calculation of the road come into your decision on this particular application?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. So a couple of things with respect to the road is if you looked at previous versions of the plan, there was a parking area and access at the top end of the property that was relocated to the bottom of the hill as well. Wanted to point out the urbanization that's planned for this project, or for this street area around 2026, 2027. So certainly in line with when you would expect to possibly see something actually on the site, which would then look at including a sidewalk, curbs, new sewer water main, and improved road design at that point. As well, there's definitely just some, as you pointed out, Councillor Harris, the variety of built forms in the neighborhood. And there are significant vegetation buffers around the site that, are separating, would separate this proposed building, anywhere between 30 and 50 meters from some of the surrounding buildings. So as you always, council always hears staff say, there's a whole bunch of inputs that are looked at and to get the output of the staff recommendation. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. And maybe we just want to follow up, Mayor Nuttall. So is there a sense that because I think Councillor Nixon's hit the exact item of concern that's been reiterated by others, that really it's the slope of the road that really seems to be the primary concern. Is this road, the grade of this road, the steepness of this road, which clearly is a safety issue? And I agree, most people avoid this road. If you live in Barrie, you don't drive the road. I rode up yesterday because I want to make a point of actually seeing it. Saw a nice house for sale up at the top of the hill. I just, is the future of this road likely to change in any material way such that it would be a lot less steep than it is today?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris, it's unlikely that it'll change significantly. Obviously, the topography is the topography, but there are other elements that, as I said, that the infrastructure improvement to the project to the street could help. As well, as always, we have appropriate signage. And again, any sort of traffic work is first submitted by the applicant with their own traffic study that then is reviewed by staff, and there's modifications made. But as I said, it's unrealistic to think that the exact grade is going to change, but that still doesn't mean that the road and the safe operation of vehicles on the road can't be improved through the capital project.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one further question, Mayor Nuttall. In the alternatives, one of the alternatives is to turn it down, and certainly it's noted about the applicant's ability to appeal. And just one of the things I think was really, and it was noted by Councillor Nixon, that the reduction from 9 stories to 6 stories. Does the appeal process allow the applicant to then change elements like the number of floors that would be approved?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris, sometimes the appeal process, throughout the appeal process, the project does change.
Okay, so the possibility exists that they could go back to their 9. Is that just a possibility that is allowed for them?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris, that there is that possibility.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Thank you, Ms. Banfield.
Thank you, Councillor. We're now going to go to Councillor Kungl and then Councillor Rima.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I mean, it's interesting because it's, a piece where, looking at all the details, again, deep respect for staff, bring this forward, right? It meets the conditions around intensification, all those other aspects and all those pieces. But I do recall the number of deputations on this when it came to public meeting and the concerns from that space. So I do want to compliment Councillor Nixon for bringing that forward. I'll support the amendment as it is. I think it's kind of a relief overall for us to have principles in this game of development, because it does feel sometimes that it is the threat of, we can kick this down the road and it could go to a tribunal and it can go up. Well, it wasn't our decision, and at least we stood on principle around something that mattered to us. I do think we've had some really difficult developments come forward, but we have supported greatest height and density in areas that made sense for the neighborhoods and communities, and I can stand by those. This one I don't stand by, so I'll support the amendment.
Councillor Rima.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm also going to support the amendment. I think that there is a place for density, and we certainly need it in our city, and I think we've done a very good job in terms of putting density where it ought to be. I think when you read the consultant's, his own report says that this proposal does not fit into the community, and I think we have a very strong policy in our official plan, the old official plan, that says that it has to be of a scale and character that integrates with the community, and I don't believe that this one does, and I think that's the problem with it, is the fit. And certainly the road is an issue. I know people talk about driving down it in the wintertime, but I walk up it in the summertime, and I can tell you that's a good workout for the heart. Anyway, this application is shared by Ward 1. It's on the right on the boundary, and certainly I've heard a lot from the residents in the area, not only in Ward 2 but also in Ward 1, who are very concerned about this and don't feel that it fits. And I think that's the message we need to send.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Councillor Nixon also didn't call me. I'm kidding, Councillor Nixon. I don't blame you on this one. You do call me. We do have a great working relationship. Mayor Nuttall, I can count to 6. So I'm not presuming anyone's vote. I can count to 6. So I'm just going to give just some general comments. I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole on anything, just very generic comments. I'm going to stand on my principles on this one, specifically supporting staff. So I guess I won't be supporting the amendment. Here's just why. So I am looking at their site plan, and I see a building there, and I look at the variances they're asking for, 3.5 meters on the front to 7, and 6.5 on the back instead of 7, so 0.5 variance there, and the 20% on their GFA, which basically every application we get is a GFA, and they're parking down to 1.22, which is over the recommended one on the draft bylaw. So if I look at this, if they were to have the right zoning, which maybe they won't in the future draft, which I believe you made a point of maybe might occur, which is fine. But if they were to have it, this would get approved. Now, I'm not trying to communicate presumptuousness that they should be getting that in the draft zoning bylaw. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the variance is there. if they were to do the, like, let's make it work without asking for any variances, they could probably make something work. It wouldn't be the best because they probably have to put this part of the building on stilts and move it north in order to not get some setbacks and move it slightly back. So why I struggle with this one is if they really wanted to do this, which I don't know how motivated the applicant is, they don't have the zoning, the right zoning category, but in terms of the variances, they could probably make it work. It would be a worse building, which is why I think that's why they're asking for variances. Sometimes people ask for variances because they just want to, because they want more and more and more. On this one, I objectively think they're just trying to make a better one on a tough slope. So the variances aren't too much. Sometimes, we'll have developments in other neighborhoods where they're asking for triple the density, not GFA. They're asking for the parking ratios. They just want 0 for anything below a certain threshold if they're affordable. We've had those recently too. So, and sometimes people won't bat an eye at those, but on these ones, they're within the realm of reasonableness, at least as a percentage. Now, in terms of technical speak, I share the concerns that my fellow councilors have about, like, it's a tough hill. I was going to make the joke to some of my colleagues here. I never went in Dundonald. Tell me you're not from the East End. Without telling me you're not from the East End, I know Dundonald well because I was raised in. I probably don't know a lot of areas in your word. Don't worry. But it is a tough area. I'm glad to hear infrastructure improvements are coming in 2026. But I'm not an engineer. So human concerns, yes. Could I do the job, Councilor Nixon, that you probably have to do to answer, to a parent saying, we've already had close calls on this, no, that's from a human aspect, that's tough. From a technical aspect though, and I'll just, I guess, defer to Mr. Gamero or Ms. Banfield. I'll start with Mr. Gamero. He can choose to answer or pass it on. From a technical engineering perspective, did the traffic reports and data say that not only does it meet the standards of safety, whatever that may be, and is the building, second question, is the building can be feasibly built? Because I remember that first initial meeting, some people were saying, we don't even know if it can be built with this slope and this grade. So 2 separate questions. I'll let whoever can answer it.
Oh, it's on. Okay. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councilor Morales, thank you for the question. So yes, the applicant did submit a transportation impact study or traffic brief in support of this application. That did evaluate the municipal or the operations of Dundonald Street as well as surrounding streets to determine the impact that this development potentially could have, and if there was an impact, mitigative measures that could be taken to ensure pedestrian and vehicular safety. That was reviewed by staff and accepted, and it was deemed that this development could be supported in that area, especially given the Wellington D2 renewal project that is proposed to occur in 2026 and 2027. One of the minor amendments that staff did have was they spoke to including signage to warn drivers of the slope of the road, just to control behavior, because they assumed, people might speed, and that is what results in accidents in most cases. And also, as Michelle mentioned, or Ms. Banfield mentioned, on the north side of the site, right now, the way it's proposed is really just you drive in like a pickup drop-off area. They had a parking area up there, and there was concerns with just a higher volume of traffic coming in and out at the top of the hill where it kind of starts to crest, which could be a safety issue. So the comment was made, they didn't want to have a parking area there, make it a pickup and drop off at a minimum, and then have all of your traffic entering and exiting the site from the bottom of the hill at the driveway access that goes into the underground, just to improve operations. So yes, all of that was considered collectively. Just municipal operations, weather conditions, and ultimately the conclusion was that our transportation planning staff supported the application.
Perfect. And to question number 2, can a building with these parameters from a grading topography, can it be feasibly built? I don't know if maybe the answer is that's not up to you to determine. You guys give zoning application, that's more engineer, but I'm wondering because that did come up last time we had the meeting a bit.
I mean, it's definitely feasible. I mean, you can really engineer anything these days, right? It all comes down to cost. So absolutely, yes, it was determined that it is feasible to build the building as proposed.
Perfect. And I'll add one bonus question to this one. I'm not suggesting this, I'm just wondering because of the feasibility and everything. if something like that, again, I can count to 6, but if it were to be approved and built, and like is this something that would trigger either this one or in a general case basis? This might be a Ms. Banfield question. Is this something that would trigger a review of the road classification? What I mean by that is maybe it becomes a one-way. And maybe it's, I don't know, I don't want to spook anybody who lives up in the subdivision and thinks now everyone's going to be always driving by their house, but maybe it's safer somehow to drive only down instead of driving up. Not that I would fix a lot of things, but I'm wondering if potential infill projects could alter road classification and direction.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales, potentially if this project got to, say, a site plan stage at the same time that we're doing the transportation master plan update, the reality is 50 units on the scale of transportation is actually quite a small number of units, and so I wouldn't suspect that off the top that a classification to a different road would be triggered by this particular application. But staff, as I said, continue to review things as they come in and make recommendations and decisions based on technical responses.
Thank you. Interesting, Mayor Nuttall. Sometimes I ask questions and don't get the answer not that I don't expect, which means that if this were to be approved, maybe it would be baked in the safety, because the road classification necessarily wouldn't be changed. This is a tough one. I just want to thank Mr. Gamero, like obviously all the stuff up the food chain, but just like earlier I did with audit and business development, like yeah, these files are important, whether it be the KPIs or it be the planning one. So I just want to recognize obviously the hard work of planning staff. Obviously these things can often be emotional, and I don't discount the human aspect of safety. But again, I don't have an iron ring on my finger, so I'm not an engineer. But I appreciate the work that they did, and to all my colleagues, but specifically Mayor Nuttall, I appreciated your comments about the uniqueness, right? Like not everything with a broad brush in favor or against, but the uniqueness to this one. So thank you to the public, but specifically my colleagues for allowing me, knowing that I can count to 6 on this one.
Thank you, Councilor Morales, for your comments, and also, recognize that you do a lot of work on intensification and trying to make sure there's housing available, and completely understand and respect that. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So just for the record, I reached out to Councillor Nixon. And I actually told him I would reach out to fellow councillors, so maybe that's why I didn't reach out to you guys. So I will be supporting the amendment that Councillor Nixon put forward. But I think framing this that it doesn't fit is the wrong frame. Like if you look at Appendix B, there's more apartment buildings within this little pocket. Just this one doesn't fit this road and everything else. But the neighborhood actually has more apartment buildings if you look at the picture in Appendix B. But I also, and I think we got to be careful here with staff. Like this is, if I remember correctly, this is almost 4 years in the making. And I'm more inclined not to support it for the simple reason, I think we've got to start voting things down. And I think with staff working for all this time, to bring the development along to get to a point of approval, I think sometimes the optics of that isn't good for our building community. And nothing's a slam dunk. You've got to work through the process. But I think staff spend an awful lot of time with developers, to get to this point. But this one here, it doesn't fit. The road is never changing to a safe place. Point A and point B is, unless we're building a tunnel or something, like the grade is just, you'd have to have retaining walls and engineered. It costs more than the building. So I'm going to support the amendment, but I just think we got to be careful with the way we frame things, because there's a lot of density in this neighborhood, and if it wasn't for the road and some of the process that's occurred, this may fit. So, but I will be supporting the councillor's amendment.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so on the amendment, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? It carries. We're on the main motion. Any comments or questions from members of committee? Seeing none. So this is as amended, main motion. All those in favor? It carries. And that completes the debate of that. Now, I will remind members of the community that just because it's approved, it doesn't mean that you can't make a deputation, because we hear from a lot of people who don't want us to proceed with stuff, and it's nice every once in a while when we hear that you want us to proceed with what we did the week before. So we look forward to seeing you next week. We're going to move past the rest of the business as it all went on consent. There's no reports of officers of the corporation, no items for discussion, no information items. We're at inquiries for our public servants. Councillor Negussi, you have an inquiry this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I just have one question, I guess, that goes to Bala. Due to a climate change, the current condition, residents have reached out to me regarding yard waste collection. In some area, there are maple trees that are still green leaves, have green leaves. And while I know there is one more scheduled for pickup, I don't think it will be sufficient to collect all the leaves. And last year, there was a weekly collection program from October to December, but this year it's only until November. And I understand the cost perspective, and I get it. But my question is there any way we can extend this yard waste pickup schedule or provide additional pickups for residents with, kind of 10 bags, 10 or more bags of leaves? Is there any plan for that?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Negussi, yard waste collection is proceeding really well this year based on the tonnage that we have collected. As of now, we anticipate that all of the yard waste will be collected by the end of November. Looking at historical data, we have typically collected very little in the month of December. Having said that, we have received 2 or 3 inquiries from residents that are concerned about the warm weather and what effect that might have on the leaves falling by the end of November. We appreciate the concerns, and we will monitor how we progress over the next 2 weeks. If the problems are isolated and not citywide, then we would recommend that the residents can bring their leaves to the landfill, or there's some information on our website about how they can leave their leaves on the ground for mulching. If we find that there is a citywide issue, staff can authorize an additional collection, and we would collect maybe during the first 2 weeks of December. This does come at an additional cost, roughly $70,000. So if we find that there is a citywide issue, we would authorize an additional collection.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bala, and thank you, Councillor Negussi. I'm seeing no other inquiries, so I'm going to move to announcements. Deputy Mayor, do you have any announcements this evening?
So, Mayor, if you would indulge me on this, it's not so much of an announcement, but it's more about the delegation to Germany, if you don't mind. So yourself, Councillor Jim Harris, the chair of IRC, and myself attended a delegation a little bit through the IRC and then a business delegation throughout Germany. And I just want to say that Ms. Slicker's team was phenomenal. The way we were represented there and respected was actually, it made me proud to be from Barrie. The way people were lined up to meet with us. And I think we're going to have some really good announcements coming forward from a lot of the preliminary conversations that the team had, and just the way we are doing things in Barrie. You know, a lot of people, like, we have a big business here in Barrie from Germany, and Fabian Berger from the Berger Group was the gentleman I speak of, and he talked about how he was supported here by Ms. Fickler's team, you know, council and everything. It was really nice to hear. So I just wanted to maybe take this opportunity to thank Ms. Fickler and her team, and yourself, Mayor Nuttall, and Councillor Jim Harris. We were represented very well, and I think it's going to do things for us in the future. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. If council will indulge me for a second, I do want to remind people that this is not a vacation. However, members of council who went had to take vacation days from their regular work to go. And that is a sacrifice when you are getting on a bus before 8 a.m. and you're getting off of it at 10:30 p.m. and you're seeing robots and you're seeing businesses collide, literally, businesses from Barrie colliding with those in Germany. In some cases, businesses in Barrie colliding with businesses in Barrie that they wouldn't have ever done so, except they're sitting on a bus for so many hours and they start talking business. And it is a sacrifice to go for the two gentlemen. This is my full-time job. This is what I do. It's an expectation. It's not for the two of them. And I just want to make sure that that's highlighted, because it has an effect, and it is a sacrifice. So thank you for doing that. I'm now going to jump to our next announcement, which I'm guessing is Councillor Kungle. I don't know for sure, but it's a really good, educated guess.
See me smiling at you? I do have two.
Perfect. There you go. But we need a microphone.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I do have two announcements. One, I might take a minute because I do want to recognize some students in Ward 3. But to start off, they're both with respects to Remembrance Day and service recognition. And so I want to just say thank you to everyone that was able to contribute to making November 4th, the previous Monday, a really special day. Outside and in the rotunda, we were joined by President Bill Sargent, members of the Royal Canadian Air Force and Association, to celebrate and recognize 25 men and women that have given years of service, including that of their family members, to progress around aviation. And the impact of their service, both nationally and internationally. So on that, if you haven't had a chance, be it members of council staff or members of the public, banners are still hung in the rotunda downstairs of each of those members. I would encourage you to visit that. There were many compliments for Melanie Rumley and staff and communications to make that possible. And for those that had questions about what was happening to those banners after this month, I believe they are going back to Huronia Wing 441 and will be used in ongoing celebrations and recognition. So it was lovely to have the rotunda filled of both those men and women that served and to receive certificates on behalf of Mayor Nuttall and Council for their service, in addition to that through the Royal Canadian Air Force Association. Needless to say, I mean, that was one element of many where I think we're doing such a lovely job in hearing from members of the public and businesses about the recognition we're given, be it renaming facilities and investing in our military heritage and acknowledging the service side that makes our city and our nation great. I do want to take a minute to say, as I was listening to the news the other day on Remembrance Day, I was not in the country at the point of time to join downtown, but it was such a lovely moment when I heard the voices of the grade 5 and 6 students from Terry Fox School in Ward 3 sharing letters that they penned after doing research on veterans that served in the Second World War. So I do want to take a moment. I'll reach out to the teacher there that led this initiative, Jared Rutledge, Thank you for your leadership in that and the research that those students did through Veterans Affairs Canada. But I do want to say, if you haven't had the chance, each of those students' letters from the research they did as a note directly to that veteran that served is published in Barrie today. So I would like to say thank you to Haleb, Connor, Matthew, Krish, Emma, Colin, Malaveran, Miriam, Halika, Aaron, Jaden, Ella, Jashin, Mitchell, Hanny, Nolan, Callie, Abigail, Neil, Edison, Colton, David, Isabella, Ibrahim, Serena, Bennett, and Chase. So you did extensive work and research. They were moving pieces, and do invite the public to please read those. And I'm very excited to be hopefully visiting Terry Fox soon and sharing my note of appreciation in person.
Thank you, Councillor Kungl. I'm now going to go to Councillor Morales, then Councillor Negussi, then Councillor Corser.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. And I think most people know, but some people online might not know, and some of our attendees that are still here might not know. So tomorrow, our Affordability Committee meeting, you may be covering it, but I'll just kind of add some color to it at 6 p.m. Here. We're going to be talking about the zoning bylaw. I bring this up because, you know, I'm kind of twofold. While I don't appreciate the defiance of the decorum rules with the signs, I do respect at least two of you have been holding the signs up the whole time. The others, you put them down, I saw. But at least two, huge respect on that. So why do I bring this up? We're going to be talking about housing tomorrow. Not all the signs refer to housing, and I understand it's a very complex issue with lots of nuances. So I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but tomorrow, some people want no housing. Some people want less housing. Some people want more, what they think is more appropriate housing. Some people want more housing. Tomorrow is where you can really make an impact. Hopefully you don't bring the signs, just bring respect and bring the discussion, but that's really where the discussion can happen about different forms of housing, not just even ownership, but also rental and purpose-built. So 6 p.m. tomorrow, and I'm sure, Mayor Nuttall, you can add some color to that, and I'm speaking for myself, not for council. Hopefully the signs won't be there, but the same enthusiasm can be.
The hats too.
Fair enough.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I have a great announcement tonight. Very exciting news. The long-awaited first edition of our city printed newsletter, the Barrie campus, is now available. This newsletter is more than just a publication. It is a bridge connecting our city, valuable information to residents, a bridge connecting our city value information to residents, especially our seniors who may have not regular cell phone, computers, or the internet. With this newsletter, our residents can stay informed about what's happening in our city and across Canada. You can get this free newsletter from City Hall, Service Barrie, Mayor Office, Peggy Health Team, East Bayfield and Allendale Recreation Center, Parkview Senior Center, Downtown, Holly and Penswick Library Branch. As a chair of this committee, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the Senior and Accessibility Advisory Committee members for making this possible, as well as my fellow councillors and the staff who have supported this initiative from the beginning. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Negussi, and I'm going to go to Councillor Corser.
I just wanted to send congratulations. Last night, the Barrie Arts Awards were held at the McLaren Arts Centre, and they were absolutely fantastic. McLaren Arts Centre, the awards honor individuals and organizations for their contribution to the arts sector, and I'd like to congratulate our winners. The Artist Beyond Barriers Award was given to Carolyn M. Boyd. Business Champion Award was for Ryan Farley. Contribution to the Community Award is Ian Mogosh. Emerging Artist Award presented to Sarah Hancock. And Excellent in the Arts Awards, Bruno Smokey, and Most Promising Youth Award went to Jules is Dead. And there was amazing performances done by the Iranian Folk Music Ensemble. The Simcoe County Chinese Association did a wonderful fan dance, and it ended with a fantastic, very, very well participated rounding of a choir of the whole room by Choir Revolution, where we sang some fantastic Canadian folk and rock songs, and it was just an incredible evening. And I'd like to thank people who came, and I got to actually give out one of the awards, which I was very happy about. And just a congratulations to all the arts, the people that won the arts awards, and to art community in our city. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. And seeing that there's no other announcements, I'm going to run through a few here. Applications for the Bright Futures Grant Barrie are now open until the 6th of December 2024. The grant provides funding to support new or enhanced programming for at-risk children, youth, and young adults. For more information, visit barrie.ca/brightfuturesgrant. A public meeting regarding the Transportation Master Plan feedback is happening tomorrow night from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at the Peggy Hill Team Community Center located at 171 Mapleton Avenue. For more information, please visit buildingbarrie.ca/transportation master plan. A public meeting regarding the new comprehensive city-wide zoning bylaw draft plan is happening at City Hall tomorrow night, starting at 6 p.m. For more information, you can visit buildingbarrie.ca, and I know we've received a lot of correspondence on this subject matter already. We're going to move to the circulation list, and I'm going to ask, are there any comments regarding items on the circ list from November the 6th, 2024? I'm seeing none. How about the 13th of November, 2024? I'm seeing none. We are, I think, adjourned. That takes us to adjournment. It's 9:05, and we are adjourned.